Talk about two super interesting topics, which are sales and growth, with a fantastic panel here. I mean, I think it's pretty fair to say sales is the lifeblood of pretty much any business, and growth is super important as part of that trajectory. Just by a quick way of background, for those of you who don't know me, and then we'll let the panelists introduce themselves. My name is Alex, and I lead Salesforce Ventures in Europe. As the name implies, we are the VC arm of Salesforce, with a portfolio of over 150 companies in the enterprise B2B SaaS space all over the world. Some of our investments in Europe include companies like New Voice Media, Cardo, Kula Data, and Digital Genius. We've also backed the likes of DocuSign, Box, and Twilio in the US. So we're biased when it comes to enterprise SaaS. It's what we love, and so we'll get a lot of good insight here from these entrepreneurs and operators who have built great businesses and really help teams scale when it comes to sales and hypergrowth. So, Hampus?
Yeah, so Hampus Jacobsson. I think my claim to fame in that sense is that I started a company back in 2002, which we grew completely out of control. We didn't have any venture capital, which meant I got a lot of gray hairs and other issues by growing too fast, and which was acquired in 2010 by BlackBerry for 150 million, which again was good that we didn't have any venture capital. And then 2 years I ran M&A for BlackBerry, which was very interesting to be other side of the table. And then I also started angel investing. Angel invested in a bit more than 50 companies. And then I started a company called Brisk, which is what says here on their profile. And Brisk built a tool to help companies really methodologize and be data-driven around sales. We had a couple of super interesting customers, Intercom, Evernote, Hootsuite, LinkedIn, but couldn't really get it working without having a professional service component, and then couldn't really productize it enough. Ended up selling off the assets, which is going to be announced by the company at Dreamforce. Not a big deal. And right now, I'm just mainly helping startups.
Right. Fergus?
Hi, my name is Fergus Gloster. I've been in the SaaS world, as we like to call it, or on-demand computing, as it was in 2000. I set up Salesforce.com in Europe with 2 colleagues and saw Salesforce grow from less than 5 million turnover to over 1.2 billion when I left in 2009. I've been doing advisory work, and I'm on the board of New Voice Media, Bright Pearl, Fieldaware. But in the intervening years, I also decided to see could I repeat the exercise, and I set up Marketo's international business from scratch in 2011 and was there till 2015.
Terrific. Orla?
Hi, everybody. My name is Ola Morin. I'm founder and CEO of Selling Through Spirituality. First of all, well done to those of you for coming back after lunch, which I always think is a great feat. I have spent the last, 10 years plus in the SaaS industry, selling and heading up teams for the likes of Citrix Online and most recently New Relic. So I was responsible for building the European Dream Team, the European Sales Dream Team for New Relic back in 2013, prior to the very successful IPO in December of 2014 for a market cap of near $1 billion. So I have, the last few months, left New Relic to start up my own venture, which is called Selling Through Spirituality. And Selling Through Spirituality really is, it's a revolutionary new sales program that takes human-to-human selling to the next level. So it really is an unapologetic assault, if I can use that word, on the traditional type sales methodologies and programs which focus solely on external techniques, one size fits all, manipulating customers, NLP type techniques, techniquing customers, take them down mentality. And it really is a values-based system. It's a values-based selling methodology. And some of the values that we teach and advocate at Selling Through Spirituality are A, compassion, So putting yourself in the customer's shoes. B, integrity, so sell onto others as you would have them sell onto you. Authenticity, so being as authentic and certainly as transparent as you possibly can with your customers, and also service, to be of the highest service to your customers and come at sales from a how can I serve approach as opposed to what can I sell.
Great. Well, a lot of diversity of backgrounds and of stories. I think to start us off, one of the things that in our experience we find founders struggle with and operators and entrepreneurs face this battle all the time is really how to hire effectively. What's the best way to get that great talent into the business? And obviously a lot of mistakes are made in that process. So I'd love to hear, Orla, why don't you start us off? Some of the mistakes that you've made. How did you identify when that mistake was made? How do you rectify it? And kind of for this audience, what are the best tips to avoid those pitfalls?
Yeah, I agree with you, Alex. I think hiring is absolute key. And for me, it's something I'm super passionate about in hiring the right people. We are the average of the 5 people we spend most of our time with, and considering that we spend about 70% of our waking lives at work, suffice to say that those we hire is so important. At New Relic, I hired according to a specific strategy, and that strategy was what I called my 5 C's. So number 1, content of character, which is absolutely key, especially if you want to align it with your culture. Content of character is number 1. Number 2 is capability. So obviously, is this person capable of doing the job that you're hiring for? Number 3 is credibility. So credibility, do they have credibility in the marketplace, or have they maybe burned their credible bridges? And number 4 is culture. So are they a good culture fit? And I think we're going to speak momentarily about culture. And 5 is curiosity and a real can-do attitude. And I know that's probably about 6, but curiosity and can-do very much fit in.
There's a pop quiz, by the way, on the 5 C's.
Pardon?
6
There'll be a
C's.
pop quiz.
Yes.
On the 6 C's.
Yes. But in the last couple of days, I heard Jeff Weiner, CEO of LinkedIn, his matrix by 3 for his hiring strategy. And I went, I like this one. And his trio was, A, they've got to be able to dream big. So he only hires people to work with him who dream big. Number 2 is they've got to get bleep done. And number 3 is they got to know how to have fun. And he also cites compassion and mindfulness as not just now a choice for organizations, but a necessary prerequisite in order to be a successful organization.
So not just the skills themselves, but also how they fit into the rest of the business. That's interesting. Fergus, any thoughts on?
So in terms of hiring, we all make lots of mistakes, and I think certainly I've made every one in the book, and they're numerous. One of the interesting things about growing a large sales or go-to-market team, particularly in Salesforce, Mark Benioff was as likely to fire you for not hiring your number of sales heads as actually you might be given more forgiveness from not meeting your bookings target, which was kind of interesting. And that created a huge pressure in the organization to hire. And speed, whilst you have goals, can be the worst enemy in terms of hiring, because the disciplines and the character that Orla has outlined in terms of looking for people, you tend to squash. But even if you do have a great recruitment process and you've lots of people, interview people, and we always had, you had to be interviewed by one of 3 of us to get a job, let's say, certainly up to 2009. And we did that to see, did you get it? Right, so that kind of fit. But actually, where we fell down, and where we fell down most often, is we failed to kind of complete the process, which is, you'd been interviewed by loads of people, you met all the criteria, really good, you gave us references, and we never followed up the references. So my advice to people is spend the time on references. Whether they're formal references or back channel references, you can avoid a lot of mistakes and a lot of pain, because if you're hiring enterprise salespeople, They have a ramp time of 9 months, but we always said you have to know within 3 months, will they make the 9 months? And then after the 9 months, the future. So that's absolutely key, that you keep that focus on referenceability. And then if you're doing the European market, do not hire people just because they speak 5 languages. It's a big common mistake made by small startups where you're looking for breadth of coverage. Hire people because they can do the job. Okay? So that's kind of some of the areas. Of many more, if we had the time, I could list
That's
every
helpful.
mistake.
And Fergus, you said something interesting around the ramp-up time. You know, expecting them to be fully operational, ramped up by 9 months, but within even 3 months, needing to see that signal that that's going to happen. In the cases where it does not happen, what have you done to, you know, either try to, you know, train better, onboard faster, or potentially it wasn't the right fit?
So I think in terms of training and onboarding, again, Marketo, Salesforce, and good companies that I observe get this really right. There's a real tendency when you're small to hire somebody. They're a good person. They've got skills of their own. You might give them a few days and then say, off you go selling. And good companies will actually spend 4, 5, 6 weeks training the salesperson, not just on the corporate messaging, not just on the systems processes, not just on the product, but on full role play. And in Salesforce, there's what they call the Belkin case study, which is a full role play of a lead coming into your email box, engaging, going through the full cycle of selling CRM and selling to the 3 worst people you would ever sell to, right? With a view to all the objection handling. And we would fail people. Now, not with the goal of being nasty in that sense, but holding people to account. And a lot of companies do not understand your go-to-market team is your most expensive team in any organization. Why would you not invest the time? So my rule is very simple. I want 5 weeks to be a short period of time in the life of a successful salesperson, rather than 1 week be a long time in the life of an unsuccessful one. And I think that's where, if they fail in 3 months, it's predominantly the company's fault, unless, of course, you've got edge cases. But then, you know, if they fail the certification twice, then you have people issues. But you look to the people last as the point of failure. Look to the territory, look to the training, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, fascinating how much process there is there, just in terms of formalizing some of that learning and making it repeatable and rinse and repeat. Hampus, what are your thoughts in terms of some of these hiring considerations, but especially perhaps you can share some stories or thoughts hiring that first non-founder, you know, those early hires in a company where, you know, the company might not have reached product market fit yet, certainly hasn't raised a lot of money, and here you are hiring someone that's going to join this vision, this dream, and some of the challenges there.
I think that, I mean, at TAT I hired the first 120 people, and I think that what I really learned there is like the first 10 people you have to realize that these are people you're going to marry. So like you have to treat it very differently, and then as like the more volume you add, like you kind of lower your bar a bit, but like from extreme. But I think that for me, it's always been like if there's not a mutual respect and cultural fit, it doesn't matter. Like I don't care how well people are performing if they don't, like one bad hire, even though that person is performing, can ruin the whole team. And for me, the best way of figuring that out is not like me interviewing them and then being prepared for that situation, but actually trying to have like people non-interviewing them. Like a trick we always did at TAT is having the receptionist to just say like, "Oh, I'm sorry, the meeting's 15 minutes late," and like being
how they respond,
and just how they respond, and being honestly a bit like rude and having a couple of issues, and just seeing, especially when we hired like VP salespeople, like some people who were like in interviews, they were just amazing, but like when they were treated a bit badly, if they were like, "This is outrageous," and it's like, well, this is never going to work. So for me, like the first hires for me is I really try to figure out ways to spend time with them without signing the papers, just like hanging out with them, and especially doing stuff where like at Brisk, one of the things we did is like we went like masquerade karaoke, because like it's a situation nobody's prepared for.
Yeah.
It's like everybody looks like a dofus, and it's like you just see who's like, I'm not in for this. And one thing actually helped a startup that I invested in. I helped them recruit a couple of people, and when we realized, actually we bought ski tickets to Chamonix and went skiing with them. I didn't go. I have 3 kids, but the founders went with the 2 people they wanted to hire. And this was super interesting. One of the people they wanted to hire was not a good skier, but was like constantly in the slope, constantly trying. When they were like in the evening partying, the person had like a beer or 2, but then saying like, I guess we're gonna ski tomorrow, right? Like I'm here for the skiing, this is fun, but like, let's not get too drunk. And the other person was a good skier, totally assholish about not waiting for the person who's not good, and really wanting to massive party in the evening. And he was like so secure about being hired, because he was like the A player. And they ended, of course, up hiring the non-good skier. And of course, this is not a ski company. But like, it was such a perfect litmus test for them. It was like, we rather want the person who's bad at something but gives a good try, who gets up in the morning and skis, than the person who thinks they're great and is an asshole and parties.
That's interesting.
It was such an, and honestly, when we recommended it, they were like, but tickets to Chamonix, it's going to be like €1,000 per person. But if you realize like a bad hire, €1,000, nothing.
Yeah.
So that, like, I really recommend that tick, doing those kind of things. Ski a weekend with somebody. If you won't, then you shouldn't hire them.
It's almost the airport test. If you got stuck with someone for 10 hours in an airport or on an airplane sitting next to you, does that person want to spend more time with you or not?
Yeah.
We're going to switch gears a little bit, and that's really helpful from a hiring perspective. But the flip side of that is, what's the right point at which you step on the gas and really accelerate sales and marketing? Right? We've heard earlier today, thinking about product market fit and spending wisely. The flip side of that is kind of accelerating when things are starting to work well and knowing that time to really focus on growth. So I'd love to hear, and this is whoever wants to jump in first, but how should entrepreneurs think about that decision in terms of when have you really found something that works? When do you know that the sales model is repeatable and that you can actually track, here's what's working, here's what's not, so that you can actually add fuel at the right time?
I would read this, like, for me, it's like one of the most important things there is to understand that the point when it's working is when you are absolutely drowning. There's so many people that are going to say that, I think I'm going to be in a bad situation in 6 months, so I'd better hire people now. That's wrong. It's like, you have to realize that you will have to close the deals, you will have to this, you will have to recruit, you will have to manage, you will have to do this. And like, when you're literally just feeling, I can't, then just like keep doing that for another month or 2. Because I think that otherwise you just end up like spending all your time hiring people, and then when they come in, you realize you haven't really got it yet. You haven't really gone.
Break it first.
Yeah, and break yourself first, honestly. I mean, really honestly, you just have to understand that if pre-hiring is a really bad way of both spending money and your own time. And then I think that really thinking about, I really agree on like having a playbook for onboarding and everything, but really making sure to realize that you can't do that unless you kind of have a methodology. So like you have to work and find it first, because a lot of people, I think they really they read that TechCrunch article or that blog post about how people who have 1,000 salespeople on board, they're 1,001st salesperson. It's not like that when you have 10 salespeople. So I think a lot of time just realizing we're not there yet, and just saying like, let's not over-document and over-analyze everything. Let's just try to get going. But when you get to a point, then of course. I don't recommend like the team with 1 salesperson to have a CRM.
Right.
I tell them like, have a spreadsheet. When you close a deal a month, get a CRM. Before that, just have it on pen and paper. It sucks, but otherwise you're going to spend all your time configuring wonderful Salesforce, elegant as it is. Instead of just doing it on pen and paper. When you know what you want, you can configure.
Bit of irony there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Fergus?
So I think it's not simple, right? It's not. Obviously, it's a relative problem. Going from 5 salespeople to 10 or 15 is actually maybe more difficult than going from 20 to 40. But I do think as quickly as possible, and remember you're doing SaaS, right? So it's a service. The second S is the most important one, right? So when you get to that point, very simple questions. Can you answer the following simple questions? Can I generate leads? Can I qualify them? Can I do a demo? Can I do pricing? Can I close a contract? Can I onboard somebody? Can I get paid?
What are the metrics?
Not so much the metrics. Just even forget the metrics.
Questions.
We're small. Just can I do this stuff? Right? And then start to learn from that. Then as you start to scale, look at appropriate metrics and create a feedback loop, okay? But, you know, equally, don't be too conservative, okay? And there's this conflict always between, obviously, investors and people like that and burn rates, but, you know, have an element of this. I can very, very vividly remember, you know, working with, you know, Salesforce, and Mark was a challenging individual at the best of times. And we're at a meeting, and this is very true. Liverpool came back from 3-0 down to win the Champions League. I'm not a Liverpool fan, but I was in the Mandarin Oriental in New York at a meeting. And Steve Garnett wanted to see the Liverpool results because he was Liverpudlian. So he said, Fergus, you do 3 slides. They're brilliant. Classic MBA, so some MBA head had come up with the metrics. And Europe was looking great. Green, green, green. And he said, you're always getting beaten up by him. It's about time you got a bit of credit. So put up the slide, first slide, bookings growth, whoosh. You know, cost to acquire, brilliant. Every metric was brilliant. On to the second slide, feeling really good. Mark issues those horrible words, go back a slide. You're in trouble. And he said, what's wrong with that slide? I said, there's nothing wrong with that slide. And very quickly, he went around the table. Best slide those Europeans ever gave us. Bunch of wasters, always failing to deliver, overpromise, blah, blah, blah. And there's nothing wrong with it. And Mark said, I'll tell you what's wrong with that slide. And he said to me, after all my years of effort and everything, you're screwing the company. And in a sense, he was right. He turned to the CFO and he said, how many A's does Fergus have? And at this 2003, we might have had 20 in Dublin, let's say. He said, double it. Steve said, we don't have the money. He said, I don't care. That's where the market is. That's where it's happening. Let's go for it. So there's an element, and the reason I tell the story against myself is that when I left in 2009, we were at hundreds of salespeople. If I had my way, we might have been at 80. I don't know what the figure would have been. So there's that conflict, and it's trying to understand that conflict and trying to... Data is some, I agree with you, CRM systems will give you some data. But it's about the process, and it's really about, if you truly believe in software as a service, the one thing we had really worked out at that stage is people loved using Salesforce.com as an affordable, easy to deploy, relatively speaking, CRM system. And they were our voice. They were our channel. And then if you get to that stage, make hay while the sun shines.
Customers kind of championed.
Absolutely.
I mean, as I think this morning, when people pull product out of your hands, I mean, that's obviously when you should hire more people. Absolutely. But I think most people pre-hire.
But if you want a metric, so if you're running a SaaS business, you have an SMB business, just to give you a metric, if they're hitting $50,000 ACV per month, it's a useful metric to hire more. If they're enterprise, look at a figure around 75,000. Quite happy to explain to you later on where those figures actually come from. They make great sense in an economic model and all of those things. But those of you that are data-centric, that's what you might look for.
Certainly from an investment perspective, that's one of the, from a VC's lens, looking at that data is critical. And one of the things we love about SaaS businesses is how you can measure every part of that journey. And obviously, there's a lot of benchmarks now. Salesforce has been going for 17 years. A lot of other SaaS companies have been around, starting to be 5, 10 years old. And so there's more and more data available. So I would encourage anyone who's building a sales or SaaS organization to make use of that, avoid some of the mistakes that, that they've shared here. Orla, you brought up culture earlier, and I'd love to hear, I think actually, I think everyone here has had interactions both with, their local teams in Europe and also with the parent companies in the US. Everyone here on the panel has also seen companies pass the 100-person mark. And that's an interesting number, whether it's 100, 150, there's a breaking point there at some point where some of the, what made a startup very small and intimate starts to go away. And so how do you think about culture in that environment of still keeping a hyper-functioning sales machine, but at the same time, making sure that the copy of the copy doesn't get diluted over time?
It's so difficult. It really is. It's so difficult to maintain a culture when you are in that hyper-growth stage. But there are certain things that you can do, of course. So culture is so important in an organization, and maintaining that culture. Because if you don't, then you run the risk of losing your best people, whether they're your best sales professionals or they are, your best developers working on 2.0, or whatever the case may be. So I always say that culture is like a muscle. So you've got to flex it and use it daily, preferably. And so at New Relic, some of the values that aligned with our culture, or that fed into the culture of New Relic, were things like boldness. So we really valued being bold, or daring greatly, if you will. And authenticity, so being authentically yourself and showing up every day as your authentic self. And we also valued curiosity as a key part of our culture. And if you do value those things, and if they are your culture, then you need to flex them daily like a muscle. And so one of the things that I always recommend to maintain that culture in hyper-growth mode is at the end of every day, you gather with your team, be it your immediate team or your wider team, and you go through 4 questions. So number 1, what was a win for you today? Whether that was an internal win or an external win with a customer. And this shouldn't take more than a couple of minutes. So what was one win? What was one fail? And if boldness is a value that feeds into your culture, then you want to celebrate your failures, possibly even more than your wins, because you want to remove the fear that people are going to fail and make mistakes. So you want your employees to dare greatly. And number 3 is, what was an act of kindness that you did in the office that day? And number 4, act of kindness, and number 4 is, what is the one thing that you're grateful for today? So one thing that you can be super grateful for. And all of that, once flexed daily, will ensure the maintenance of your culture.
I think the tricky thing about culture is also that people kind of live on a derivative. It's like, when the original team kind of doesn't need a certain growth. They enjoy finding things. But then you start growing, and then you hire people who love growth. But then, of course, you get to a point where you kind of getting some kind of stalling. Like, you can't double every year for 50 years. And we at TAT, when we stopped doubling, like we grew 100% revenue year after year, when we went to like growing like 60, 70, 1 or 2 years, I mean, certain people in the team just started hating it. But others, of course, started thriving. And I think the problem we really figured out is that we have to understand that certain people, they will leave you if you don't double, or whatever kind of growth you have. And certain people will start enjoying it. And just realizing that that's also natural. Like when a company comes into like a maintenance mode, if you are okay with it being into maintenance mode, yeah, the exponential growth people will leave. And you can't keep them because they'll, but if you want to stay in exponential, then you can have more of those and you will not satisfy. I think that like people's mentality is they look at a derivative. They don't care about the size.
Yeah, there's chapters in the company's history.
Yeah. And you can maybe keep it, like if some companies keep growing, but then you get like people like Travis. I mean, Uber has been growing exponentially constantly, and people at Uber are a-holes, but they want a-holes because that's how they grow, and it's just okay. Sorry, Uber.
Okay, interesting. Fergus, we'll leave you the last parting thoughts, and maybe you could share some insights. You've obviously been around a lot of folks who are just embarking on this process, and so from a receptibility of learning about kind of mistakes learned, what's the best advice you have to not, kind of repeat the same mistakes that you've shared here?
I
Your
think
do-over.
if you look at, again, the companies that are successful in the SaaS world, and the SaaS world is brilliant because it tore the software industry apart. It not only changed the delivery model, but the business model. But most people forget that second S. You're now in the service business. You're no longer in the product. Here's the product. Give me a check. I'm gone to the hills. Those days are gone. And you've got to inculcate that. And the companies that are really, really good at it, Mark Benioff was brilliant at this. I presume he continues to be. Phil Fernandez was brilliant at it. Any customer of any size that had a problem, they were treated as if you had a problem in your hotel or a good restaurant or a good whatever. The service and to try and fix it. Because when you're running, let's say a SaaS company, in the early days, when broadband didn't exist, most of our calls were about Salesforce is slow. And it had nothing to do with Salesforce. It had to do with their ISPs. It had to do with the ISP selling too much overload, etc. We had to prove it. We could have easily said, that's not our problem, that's yours, etc. They're very simple things. Inculcate that into your organization, right through from lead inception, or even product, obviously, lead inception, the whole way through, and be relentless about it. You have to be relentless, because unfortunately, irrespective of the brilliant ideas ye have out there, other people have similar ideas. The people who win are those who execute best. Salesforce did not have the best CRM on-demand system in 2000. There were other products. I'll let you to research them. But they don't exist anymore. We out-executed them. And ye will win in this business if your service, in the holistic sense of the word, is better than everybody else's through your company.
Embody customer success.
Is Salesforce slow because of my ISP?
Well, so this is, you joke now, but it's the same problems with Netflix. I mean, it's new challenges that emerge, and I think the nice thing here is we've heard a lot about how to focus on that customer, how to kind of think, be customer centric, but at the same time know when to ramp up that sales machine and do it right. So, thank you very much for those perspectives, and hope you enjoyed it.